Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I'm Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are breaking down the New York Giants 2024 offseason. We're going to go over all the departures and free agent acquisitions, as well as reviewing their draft class as well. And then at the end of the video, we're going to break down their 2024 schedule and provide our record prediction for the team. So be sure to stay tuned for the entire video to see how we think the Giants are going to do this year. But before we get into it, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also ring that bell to get notified when we create new content. Ryan and I, we release videos Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, and right now we're in the middle of our NFL offseason recap series. So this is coming out on Friday, June 14th. So we've already started the NFC East. So ring that bell to get notified when the Eagles and Cowboys videos are coming out. And while you're at it, after watching this, go watch to see how the Commanders offseason was on our videos. So Ryan, let's pull this up here for the New York Giants. And I think the stat to me that picks out, obviously one, I mean, was a good season for the Giants just as a whole. But the stat to me that picks out is the fact that they had the second worst offensive line season that we've ever seen, giving up 85 total sacks. And this is kind of one of the things that we'll get into here. And I'm not saying Daniel Jones is the guy. He did end up getting hurt. And I think he had a good 2022 season behind a pretty similar abysmal offensive line. But nobody really is going to be successful when they're getting sacked that many times. Some of those sacks are definitely his fault. Absolutely. Is he the guy? Probably not. But still, I like what the Giants did in the offseason to at least start to rebuild that offensive line to give them options. And that's what we're going to break down into here in a second. But I think of the 2023 New York Giants offseason, or the 2023 season, sacks. That's just all I just think about how awful that offensive line was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think they lost both tackles within the first 4 weeks. And then
but Evan Neal hasn't been good anyways.
No.
Yeah.
But he also, I've been preaching this. He was a left tackle at Alabama. They switched him to right tackle immediately because they already had Andrew Thomas. Transition hasn't worked. Not saying Evan Neal would have worked out at left tackle. Just saying he had to switch. Not a good way to start your NFL career. But anyways, I digress. Yeah, that to me, I think they have a horrible offensive line. This is by far the worst offensive line in the league. And then
2023, we're going to break down the new offensive line.
Okay, it was the worst offensive line in 2023. But then I think you look and they had an average running game. They were 16th in total rushing yards. And to me, that I don't usually do this when it comes to rushing yards. I give 90 to 100% of that credit to Saquon Barkley for being able to, well, I guess in Daniel Jones, I guess he probably has some rushing yards in there as well. But Saquon Barkley had to earn every single one of his yards last year. And that to me, is just the fact that he was able to get this team to an average rushing team with this bad of an offensive line is very impressive. And then we'll get to the departures here in a minute because I have another take on that. But other than that, their offense sucked. Total yards, they were 29th. Passing, they were 31st. It was just not a good offense except for Saquon Barkley.
So I agree with you to the point when it comes to rushing, and Saquon Barkley was the best player on the offensive side of the ball, probably on the team overall. But 600 of those rushing yards actually came from their three quarterbacks, Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor, Tommy DeVito. So in theory, Saquon Barkley through 14 games, they didn't break 1,000 rushing yards, which isn't. It's not as no. Most teams have 1,000-yard rusher now, but in today's NFL, it's definitely less. But to your point, though,
even got that.
Yeah, no, I know. But to your point, though, he just couldn't really do much of anything. He did have 280 receiving yards off 41 catches, which is low for him. But that's not, as I said, not his fault just because he had Tommy DeVito throwing the ball to him. And so it was not. I think Saquon Barkley's happy to be out of New York, and now he's playing for his Philadelphia Eagles team. Sorry, Giants fans, but I also think, too, Saquon deserves better. So very curious to see how he ends up doing here. But to your point, though, really the rushing stat is kind of inflated because Saquon Barkley could only do so much, and then with adding on that 600 of those
Yeah.
rushing yards, QB rushing yards, it kind of looks a little bit similar to when the Bills were the number one rushing team in the league, because Josh Allen has like 800, 900 rushing yards to go
Yeah.
along with the other 900 rushing yards that they have as a team. So I
Yeah.
think that's something here to improve on. I will say defensively, kind of looking at these stats, I think these stats are a little bit weighty because I think during the second half of the year, that defense did get significantly better, I felt.
Dexter Lawrence came back from injury. Deontay Banks kind of turned things up a little bit. They, I will also say, this offense put this defense in horrible positions throughout the year. Just
Yeah.
not doing them any favors. Very similar, in my opinion, to New England. I think there actually is some talent on this defense. They just were put in some horrible situations.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, there's definitely some talent on the defense now for sure. But even to some of the games, I think are pretty lopsided as well. Like in week 3, they gave up 441 yards. Week 5, 525 to Miami. The 441 was San Francisco. Then they had a couple of good weeks in a row, though, but then they gave up 640 yards to Dallas, 404 yards to Washington. So there are some major outliers here that, well, outliers might not be the right word because I just listed off several, but it's they would have really good spurts of like where they can hold teams under
streaky.
300. Yeah, it's very streaky here. But really, then too, after that Washington Commander team in Week 11, they only had one game over 400 yards. That was Week 16 against Philly. And Philly had to play a great game against them just to eke it out. Then they did give up 391 to the Rams, but 391 nowadays, I mean, it's not the worst in the world, but they had some serious outliers. I think like that Cowboys game, for example. I just use outliers again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I think inflated that a little bit. I think this defense is going to be better. I think then too, we'll get to the acquisitions here in a second, but I think their sacks number is going to go up based off some of the people that they've gotten. But let's quickly move on though now to the people that left the Giants. I think obviously we mentioned Saquon Barkley. I think another big one is going to be Xavier McKinney, that safety as well. They did add. Let me double check here. They did add people in the secondary to help out as well, and also then added some people in the draft. So potentially that's where some of that replacement could be. But to me, when I look at this, I think that is probably the other main player outside of Saquon Barkley that has moved on from the organization. Ben Bredesen as well.
Yeah.
Losing your left guard also with a team that's already struggling with their offensive line. Actually, maybe it was a good thing that he left, but if the offensive line was that bad. But I think it also kind of just goes to show, I think that they were just kind of blowing up as many of these pieces as possible on the offensive line and just trying to bring in more established pieces that can hopefully improve this offensive line.
Yeah, they may feel the loss of Ashawn Robinson a bit. He played a pretty significant amount of snaps for them in 2023. But like other than that, I think most of these guys are rotational players. Sterling Shepard, again, maybe, but we'll get to the acquisitions here in a little bit on kind of who they to replace these guys. So all in all, not a whole lot here other than like the two big names. Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley.
Jahad Ward was their second leading sack leader with 5 sacks, but he only started half the games, but he did play in all 17 games. But I think that's a great segue why I'm not too worried about losing Jahad Ward, because I would gladly give up Jahad Ward for when you go and trade for Brian Burns coming out of Carolina here. Instantly, I think the sack total is going to go up a bunch. I think you put him across from Kayvon Thibodeau, who had 11.5 sacks last year. Kind of this revamping of this whole defense. Because really, honestly, that front seven is, I was just looking at it, and we'll take a deeper dive into here in a second. It's actually pretty solid, for going Kayvon Thibodeau, and then you have Dexter Lawrence, as you mentioned, Bobby Okereke, then you got Azeez Ojulari. There's a lot of solid guys on that front seven. Then you add Brian Burns to the situation, and I really kind of like how that defensive seven's come together. And then they've made some good moves, I think, on the secondary side as well. But in general, though, I do actually like the pick of a Drew Lock, because worst case scenario, if Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones who was in 2023 with a good offensive line, I think Drew Lock can maybe be a little more consistent for you there. Definitely not long term solution. So You bring in Devin Singletary will help out a little bit consistently from moving on from Saquon Barkley. He had a kind of a good comeback season in 2023 with Houston. And then just picking up some other filler guys on the skill position players here as well, picking up Allen Robinson and Isaiah McKenzie. So offensive line, though, Ryan, is kind of where we knew a lot of their money was going to be going. So I think in Jermaine Illuminor, John Runyon also were huge pickups for this team.
They were good pickups. I'm a little concerned at like the quality of players. I think Jermaine Illuminor is like in his 30s. He was a swing tackle for the Patriots for a while. He was the right tackle for the Raiders last year. Yeah. And so like I understand the signing. I still just don't know how much better they really got on that front. And I'm also not faulting them with where they were in the draft. Joe Alt had already gone. They just didn't really get an opportunity to go out and really improve this offensive line in this draft. So
yeah, John Runyon's a good piece though. Adding him,
he is. Yeah, he's a good piece.
It's a good piece. Then even had other guys like Aaron Stinney, who came from. Sorry, just want to double check. I come from Tama, then Austin Schlottman as well, who came from Minnesota. I think having just more options, more pieces to the puzzle where you can kind of move guys around, I think is going to help out a lot. Just kind of with the decision making, really on forming that offensive line.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so, like, I think they definitely improved the depth and made this offensive line better. And hopefully through competition, some guys will improve. I just don't see that big move there in that offensive line to really like take it the worst offensive line in the league, average at least. And so I also replacing Saquon Barkley with Devin Singletary. Just that's a very big downgrade. And I know running backs, he was already on a second contract with the Giants and whatnot. I struggle with that move specifically. Just because he was their entire offense last year.
I'll say this, probably unpopular opinion. I get why they didn't. Because if you look at the Moneyball approach, if you're looking to replace 900 rushing yards, 41 catches, and then like 260 receiving yards, I think you can do that. I think you get the 900 rushing yards with Devin Singletary. Then I will say I think that too, if you're trying to look for replace some of that receiving yards as well, Tyrone Tracy, who they drafted in the 6th round, is pretty good all around running back. A little bit smaller, no relation.
He's a former receiver.
Yeah, and so no relation to the show, but Tyrone, you're welcome on to the Tracy Take anytime. But I think that he will. I think kind of develop potentially be a good complement as well. And they did get Eric Ray last year also too, who sat behind him.
Yeah,
and he got some playing time as well when Saquon Barkley was on IR. So I do see your point, and I think that's kind of one of the things here where like Giants are also rebuilding, very similar to the Commanders. Big things go. The big thing though is going to be Malik Neighbors being signed here. The hope is that it's going to open up a new dynamic, I think, here in this Brian Daboll offense. And so I will say, too, Tom, before we get into the depth charts, it's one of the things I was thinking about is I think depending on how poorly the Giants end up doing this year, I think Brian Daboll's not on the chopping block. I think it will be Daniel Jones first. I think the Giants, almost the entire franchise will give Brian Daboll another opportunity because he did take this team to the playoffs in 2022. He did make Daniel Jones look like a great QB. Is that Daniel Jones, like maybe he regressed a bunch or maybe it was a complete outlier to the season? But I think we've all saw what Brian Daboll was able to do with this offense in 2022 with a horrible offensive line, with receivers that were hurt. I think if they can go and get the right QB in the situation here, I think that he'll have more opportunities here than Daniel Jones. If Daniel Jones comes out in the first 5 weeks and sucks, everybody's going to be like, put Drew Lock in. They put Drew Lock in, then they start looking average. I could see the argument being amongst the Giants fan base that it's like, okay, if we can get an above average QB, which is very hard in this league, I think that Brian Daboll will be able to stick around. That being said, though, it's a winning league. You have to be able to win games.
Yeah, I would agree. I could hear an argument that Brian Daboll should not be fired.
Well, and I'll say this, though, to counter my point, though. If they have like a Ron Rivera-esque type 2023 Washington Commander season where the second half of the season looks like nobody showed up to practice for the week, then get him out of the organization. I'm just saying, though, I think everything that happened with the Giants team from an outsider's perspective, and from as Falcons fan, I don't know what it's like to be disappointed at the end of the season. Uh, so I can't really understand the Giants fans, but I think Brian Dable, considering everything that he has been given to him, I think he's been the coach now for 2 years. Yeah, yeah. And so 2022 made the playoffs, won a game at Minnesota, and then last year, I just think they got decimated with injuries last year. Daniel Jones, when he did play, didn't look that good. I mean, when you had to go and resort to Tommy DeVito being like your QB, and that was kind of the storyline, and you're trying to win some games. They didn't really have a good receiver. Sterling Shepard tore his ACL, just a freak play. Offensive line's been struggling this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, head coach is the guy that makes the end decision, but also sometimes too, you just kind of got to look at it and be like, hey, just how unlucky were they last year? And so I think Brian Dable is going to have more opportunities with the Giants post 2024 if things don't work out. Daniel Jones, I think this is like you are on your last straw. We're loaning you a straw. That is how poorly and I think how frustrated people are with him.
Yeah, well, I think Daniel Jones has already kind of worn out his welcome in New York, and to me, I he would not be the quarterback right now if they were picking third.
Oh yeah,
They could not get in the top three
yeah.
to get a guy, and so and
Well,
they
and add on to
probably
your
didn't
point.
value
Go ahead. Go ahead.
and they probably didn't value Penix, Nix, or McCarthy as high as these receivers, and so they were just like, well, we'll ride it out with Jones, we'll uh, stink for a year, and then maybe get Shador or Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers at the top of the 2025 draft, and that's a risky strategy. Most coaches don't make it through one quarterback cycle. Like you usually get what you get, and if it doesn't work out, you're gone too.
That's just the league. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just the league. That's kind of why I feel like the Giants, especially an organization that was quick to move off of like Joe. Granted, it was Joe Judge, so that's understandable. But like they were quick to move off of Joe Judge, like, and so I don't know if they would do the same with Brian Dabble because he has had some success. It'll be interesting. I could hear the argument that he shouldn't be fired though.
Well, I also think too as well because I don't think because Brian Dable's obviously then also to the one that doesn't sign the contract extension or whatnot. But Saquon Barkley is Saquon Barkley, and so I
Yeah,
think another thing to your point of wearing out his welcome, Daniel Jones getting the extension, which I don't blame him. If someone gave me $160 million, I would absolutely sign the contract. Like I don't care how bad at
yeah,
football I am. But I think from the fan base perspective, though, it'd be like, no, you should have franchise tagged Daniel Jones, and then we signed Saquon Barkley to 4 years. And then now
yeah,
Saquon Barkley goes to your division rival because Daniel
yeah,
Jones did not play well at all. And he got hurt. So we'll have to kind of go wait and see.
yeah.
They're trying, it looks like I think this is a good segue to then kind of like looking what this team's going to be like in 2024. Because
Yeah, I that was a good segue, but I have one thing I want to Daniel
go ahead.
Jones really quick. So the one thing, like when he signed his extension, he did come off that pretty good year where they went to the playoffs, but he ran for a lot of yards, which was a big catalyst for why this offense was able to remain somewhat productive. And I think the Giants looked at it as well. We could let him walk in free agency, or we and go back to what's in the draft or what's like uh what you call it, or maybe try to find somebody else, go after like a Derek Carr, or we could just re-sign him and hopefully try to replicate this with better pieces around him. And they chose the latter, but then didn't put the better pieces around him. So like,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not trying to make the case for Daniel Jones. I think he'll be gone. It's just they didn't give him a whole lot of help after he signed that extension. They also only signed him to, it was really a 2-year $80 million extension. They have no guaranteed money after this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
So like they still set it up that they could get out of it, but they were kind of pigeonholed where like they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And do you keep an average quarterback, or do you move on and potentially go into this purgatory of being a 2-15 team?
Well,
So
and this is where hindsight, and I'm definitely been on the one on the channel now. I'm confident, be like running backs are replaceable. You can go in, like you don't have to pay this guy that much money. But hindsight, though, 2020, to your point of Like you could have brought in more pieces just with more money because you paid him so much. If they would
Yeah.
have, they would have saved money though if they franchise tagged Daniel Jones, but then extended Saquon Barkley because they wouldn't have given nearly as much money to Saquon Barkley just because he's a running back compared to then what the quarterback market is if they just franchise tagged him. So there would have been more money out there for them to play with.
So here's an interesting thought, and this is a total hypothetical, and we might get way off track. They could have let Daniel Jones walk last year, or in 2023, in the 2023 draft, taking Will Levis at, I think it was like the 19th or 20th, or no, it was like the 25th pick because
Yeah,
they won in the first round. They beat the Vikings, and so could have taken Will Levis with that pick, and then had all that money to go out, extend Saquon Barkley for 3 to 4 years, go get a, I don't say top flight wide receiver because they don't hit free agency anymore, but go get some wide receivers, some tight end help and whatnot. Like that is the alternative
yeah.
to re-signing Daniel Jones. So sorry, we got a little off track there, but
No, it's
just
all
an
good.
interesting food for thought.
It's fun. It's fun to judge. It's fun. It's fun to play Monday morning. That's literally our whole show is Monday morning quarterback. So,
Yeah.
but looking here now, this is the offensive depth chart as of right now, as of Thursday, June 13th. I guess yeah, because it's midnight now when we're recording. So, but this is the Giants depth chart as of right now. And the thing to me, obviously, is I'm fairly confident this is going to be the starting receiving room. Um, I'm very curious in how the rest of the team shapes up. I would say maybe Daniel Bellinger should be the starting tight end just because he's younger, but curious to see how Theo Johnson develops. Daniel Jones probably will be the starting quarterback, barring Drew Lock comes in and then Daniel Jones is still recovering from his knee injury, doesn't look good or whatnot. Curious to see how Devin Singletary, Eric Ray end up doing if they want to roll with the veteran. Probably will start off the season. And so I obviously go with all the skill position players first because the biggest thing, though, is going to be none of this is going to matter if this offensive line doesn't improve at all. I find it interesting right now that they have Jermaine Illuminor as the left guard. To my knowledge, I haven't known him play in the interior, but I do find that interesting, though, because one of your theories is maybe kicking Evan Neal into guard and just trying it out as a why not. Well, Jermaine Illuminor can play right tackle or left tackle and move Andrew Thomas around. I have to go and wait and see. But
Yeah.
all of the things that we say skill position player wise, I think as we saw last year, isn't going to matter if this offensive line is as atrocious as they were last year. So I like the John Runyon adding. I like Jermaine Illuminor being added there, another good veteran presence. I think then you go and get Aaron Stinney or Austin Schlottman. I think provide just good depth overall. And I'm missing another one, Matt Nelson, also somewhere. So I think they've given themselves a lot of options. Nobody is safe. Outside of John Michael Schmitz, he should be the starting center. He should absolutely be the starting center.
Yeah.
But I think all the other four offensive line positions are up for grabs, especially Evan Neal. Like if he looks bad and Matt Nelson looks better, Jermaine Illuminor looks better, they will bench him for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, I think at that point he might not even make the roster. I mean, he's going into year 22, 23. Is this year 3 for him?
Year 4, year 3, yeah.
Yeah, year 3. Like he's going into year 3. I mean, they probably would look to move him for a late round pick or something.
Yeah.
And like the other thing I find really interesting besides this offensive line is how like this wide receiver room. They have 14 wide receivers on the roster currently. And I think you look, Isaiah Hodgins has made some plays for them. Gunnar Olszewski is a special teams asset. Miles Boykin, they signed in free agency. Like Jalen Hyatt was a 3rd-round pick last year. I think you would think he's pretty much a roster lock as well. So like I'm very interested to see kind of what this wide receiver room shapes up to be as well, because they have a lot of names in here, and so I very curious to see what goes on.
Yeah. I almost would think too because they're trying to make sure that they know like that they can get some receivers there. I think they would probably cut some tight ends first before they
Yeah.
start to really kind of siphon off some of the receivers here. Because to your point, though, like all those guys are solid, especially the two Allen Robinson as well.
Yeah.
He has NFL experience. So he's not going to be a game changer for them, but still just to have some of that veteran depth.
Well, he's also he's a 32-year-old Allen Robinson. This isn't him from 8 years ago. And then Isaiah McKenzie also had some good years in Buffalo, played for the Colts last year. So a very, very interesting wide receiver room. A lot of guys, but not a lot of like true playmakers.
Yeah,
Um, but it'll be interesting. I mean, this is you look at teams that are picking in the top of the draft: the Washington Commanders, the Patriots, uh, the Giants. Now, like they have a lot of these, a lot very similar depth charts. Where all right, they signed a lot of names. Who is actually going to emerge and be a quality player? So
yeah,
let's move on to the defensive depth chart. I do think this is a little bit of a clearer picture for those guys. So for Giants fans, defensive line, they signed Jordan Phillips. Dexter Lawrence has been a really great asset for them. Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. All right, that's your front four. Uh, Linebackers, Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, Cordell Flott. Like,
he's a corner there. So
oh, corner, sorry.
yeah, yeah,
I
but,
saw LB, but I just didn't see
yeah.
the C in the middle.
No, you're good. But then you still have guys like Isaiah Simmons who they traded for as well.
Yeah.
So that's where I think that I say front seven. It looks like they have six.
Yeah.
But still, I think that front core, the defensive line and the linebacker room, I like that front seven there. And so I think the biggest thing to me when I look at the main storylines for the Giants going into the offseason, it's just going to be how does the secondary shape up, especially with Xavier McKinney moving on. And then, if I'm not mistaken, too, they had the second most turnovers by the defense in the league with 31, and which
Hmm.
is a great stat. And so keep trying to build on that. I think a lot of that does come from that pressure from the defensive line getting after the quarterback as well, causing those mistakes. So how does Tyler Nubin develop? Drew Phillips, who is currently slotted in right now, but I think that's going to be a fun battle between Drew Phillips and Dre Hendren also. So I think just kind of just seeing how the secondary shapes up because and if this is the starting a secondary as of right now, super young secondary, very young
Yeah.
with Cordell Flott being the most experienced. I will say I'm not sure how old Jason Pinnock is. I will say coming from the Jets here, and
Yeah.
so
I'm
I'm
not
not
sure
as familiar with
either.
that.
They did sign Jalen Mills in free agency also to kind of be a safety corner player, just some good depth there. Like
Yeah,
they have some interesting names there. I definitely really want to follow Deontay Banks, the second year corner from
yeah,
Maryland, and then also Tyler Nubin and Drew Phillips. They're new guys. Those are going to be some good storylines to follow. But to me, I think with Drew Phillips and Tyler Nubin, it's more or less just going to be when they get in rather than if. And I think Tyler Phillips will probably start pretty close to right away.
yeah,
And they will have I think a much improved front seven, and we've talked about it on this channel. If you have to pick one side of the defense or one part of the defense to be better, the secondary or the front seven, I would go with the front seven because we saw Philly a couple seasons ago. That front seven had a record breaking
dominant.
year, and it covered up a lot of holes that were exposed in this past season in that secondary. So
Yeah,
uh, I like what they have going on the defensive side of the ball. Let's get into their schedule here really quick. Starting out, first 6 games, uh, hosting Minnesota in week 1, at Washington, at Cleveland, then hosting Dallas, then at Seattle, and then hosting Cincinnati on Sunday Night Football. Some winnable matchups here. I think all of the division or both of the division matchups are winnable. Minnesota will be interesting. We'll have to see kind of who's starting at quarterback there. But all in all, like I think this is a decent start to the season for this team.
yeah. I also think too, looking at it, having Dallas and Cincinnati, their two toughest games, I would say, of the schedule on primetime games, I think is going to benefit them, especially them two being at home. I will say Dallas probably is a better team, and so your theory normally proves correct that the better teams on paper normally win the Thursday night football game since it's just a shortened week.
Yeah.
But if we're able to see some good, solid improvement, Daniel Jones able to play consistently. The offensive line is moderate. Actually, not even moderate. They're just like slightly below average. That'll be much improved to what they were last year. But then also too, it's very possible that Dallas regresses with Dan Quinn moving on. They lost a couple other pieces as well that were key on the defense and offensive side of the ball. So there could be some opportunity for them to win that game. I agree with you as well. I think there's some opportunity. Then you go Philly at Pitt, Monday Night Football again, Washington, and then flying out to UK to play Carolina. Have a bye after that, which is going to be very nice coming back from London. And then Tampa Bay at Dallas on Thanksgiving, and then New Orleans as well. A lot of these games, I will say, can go. When looking at the schedule, like this is the most mixed game. Are you just now seeing the turkey?
No, I saw it and I was like, are they playing a game in Turkey?
That's fair, actually. Yeah, that would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
I could
because
see
like they're doing Brazil and like they're doing
in
like
UK.
Spain and UK now. So I
They're
was like,
talking
are they
about in
going to
Spain. Yeah. They play
yeah,
games
in
up in
Germany
Buffalo,
also. So
also
I was like, are they
Germany.
doing a game in Turkey?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, um, but I know Mexico, I think, is another potential option. But anyways, they're
Yeah.
similar to what I said outside of with Dallas. Like, who knows what Dallas is going to be like by week 13? Because I think they can regress. But at the same time, though, who knows really how Philly's going to bounce back? Pittsburgh, you're going to have Arthur Smith running that offense with Russell Wilson. Sounds like uh, interesting recipe for success, I will say. Washington, Carolina, who knows? Tampa Bay, can they have the same success? And then New Orleans, I think it's going to be average at best. They're going to be 8-9, 9-8, just like how they always are. So that's where I say, really, I think this middle stretch of the schedule, I think, can really make or break this Giants season. If the Giants can be who we think they were in 2022, I think they can go on a good run here of games. But if they're like who they were last year, they can lose to some pretty average to below average teams, such as Washington, Carolina, New Orleans, Pittsburgh also in there. So it's just going to be very interesting to see how this Giants team develops.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like the one thing that I struggle with, and we can kind of, well, I'll wrap it up here. And final four games: Baltimore, at Atlanta, Indianapolis, and at Philly. Those are tough four games to close out the year. I think all those teams are going to be competing for playoff spots or already in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that's just a tough four games. But let's get into our record predictions here. So I had the Giants at 4-13, and my biggest problem that I had going into all these games is, yes, this defense is good. Yes, this offense is really bad. And the one thing that I'm concerned about is this offensive line isn't going to be able to pass protect. They're not going to be able to get any push really in the running game. They don't have Saquon Barkley to go and create. So now this offense is one dimensional, and it's not a good dimension to be one dimensional. And I saw this last year with the Patriots. They really struggled to do anything. The Patriots had a top 10 defense last year, and they were 4-13 with one of the worst. And granted, it was one of the worst offenses we've ever seen in professional football. So like maybe it's a bit of an extreme, but I think you look like maybe they have more offensive weapons than Washington,
Well, I'll say actually
and that's about
because your comparison
that's
then
it.
to New England is I think what makes that team this team different than New England is I mean Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton are all three weapons that are significantly better than whatever New England had last year, and I think that combined then with the offensive line is improving a little bit. But the biggest piece to me on why I'm going with 6-11 for them, and potentially even could go 7-10, just kind of on that middle stretch. Who really knows? But this Giants defense, I think, is going to be one of the best in the league. I think you add Brian Burns, you add a lot of good guys. It did lose Xavier McKinney, yes, but I think they're going to be able to keep improving on that front line. They improved that front line tremendously. I think they have a good linebacking room as well. So that front seven is, or front six, however you want to say it, is going to be top notch. It's going to be able to get after the quarterbacks a lot. Going to definitely increase their sack total number, which was just 34 last year. And so I think they could be up there in the 50 range, which I think is going to help out significantly. So maybe even taking some pressure off the offensive side of the ball, who have some decent playmakers. And so Daniel Jones is going to be a huge question mark, absolutely. Offensive line is going to be a huge question
Yeah.
mark, absolutely. I still think it's enough for them to. I think it's going to be enough to get them outside of the top 5 picking. I think maybe closer to 10th overall. I don't think they're going to be one of the best teams in the NFC. I think they're going to be just short of the playoffs. I still think that they're behind Philadelphia and Dallas, even with all the troubles that Philly had towards the end of the season, and combined also then too with Dallas and some of the pieces that they lost on their end. I still feel like those are going to be the two teams to beat. But as I said, though, that middle stretch of the season, it's not like they're playing a bunch of teams that are like, oh, these are for sure playoff locks. So I think there could be some
Yeah.
opportunity if we're wrong, and we're never wrong, for them to maybe flip it around and go on a run to maybe they can push a winning record if all the pieces fall in place. But there's so many question marks.
Yeah. I think that to me, if they have a winning record, that would be a. Oh, go ahead.
Well, go ahead. No, you.
Oh no, I was gonna say, to me, if they have a winning record, that would have had to have gone perfectly for them, or like the 2024 season. I somewhat disagree about the weapons because Jalen Hyatt didn't really do that much last year. Darius Slayton has had a couple good seasons, with over 700 yards in the past two, and so like that's a good season. It's just that was in a lead role. I think Malik Neighbors will come in and he'll add another level of explosiveness to this offense, and that's why you drafted him at 6 overall. That's a totally different conversation. And so like I understand that. I just don't I don't have confidence in this offense to be able to put up points, and you have to be able to score in this league. And it's like even like maybe okay, so Washington and Carolina are the only two teams that I can really look at and pretty confidently say that they have more like that they have a better offense or more offensive potential, I guess is what I'm trying to say, than those teams that they're playing against. And then I go look like Cleveland has a good defense. Minnesota didn't have a good defense, but they were aggressive and kind of created turnovers. Dallas, I don't really know what to expect, but they still have Micah Parsons. Like there are still other. They have the Giants have a tougher path to victory than a lot of their opponents this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's to me is I still fall back on that. I also maybe I have Daniel Jones derangement syndrome, I guess, where it's just like I can't trust what Daniel Jones is doing at all times. So
DJDS. You have
yeah,
DJDS.
DJDS. Yeah.
Yeah, I can
So
understand. It does. I also think too. We're nitpicking over a horrible losing record or like a somewhat mediocre losing record, and so
yeah.
I think that this is still like a pseudo rebuild. I feel for the
Yeah.
Giants, this is absolutely a tryout season for Daniel Jones. Is if there's even worthy of him coming back next year. Honestly, that story might already be written, and like they're just kind of bypassing this time and kind of whatever happens. Because with next year's QB class, I'm projecting there's probably going to be one quarterback taken potentially in the top 5, maybe one a little bit later. But then there's going to be a lot of actually quarterbacks as well, kind of in the teens and 20s that I think that they can kind of go and develop, such as like a Quinn Ewers, as you mentioned, Carson Beck, Shador Sanders. I think would be fascinating in this offense. So I think there's going to be opportunities. I think for the Giants team to improve the quarterback position in next year's class.
So I will stand. To me, this would be the perfect scenario for the Giants because I think after everything we laid out, they're not really they don't really have a chance to make the playoffs in 2024. Like great again, if they go 9-8, maybe they hit the 7 seed, whatever. That to me, the best case scenario is the Giants, this offensive line progresses and gets better. This defense shows signs of life, but they're not good enough to really get outside of the top 5 in terms of draft capital. Like maybe like they kind of do what the Patriots did. They lose games 10-7, 6-0. Like they do things like that. Maybe it's just because Daniel Jones is so bad that like they can't do anything with the football, and then they get in prime position to take a guy like Shador Sanders. But again, that is with the hope of Malik Neighbors looks good. This offensive line looks like it's going in the right direction. This defense that maybe they're above average in sacks and pressure, and Deontay Banks and Cordell Flott show progress. I know that's probably like a way too optimistic thing because if those guys are making plays and looking good, then they're probably better than 4-13. So yeah, just a interesting kind of food for thought for Giants fans there. Do you want to Do you want to suck and not be in range to get a quarterback, or do you want to suck and be in range to get a
Oh,
quarterback? Is what
trust
I'm
me, as a
saying.
Falcons fan, I love
Yeah.
picking 8th overall every year in the draft. So
Yeah.
it's probably my favorite time of year.
But yeah, I think it was a really interesting offseason for the Giants. Let's go ahead and wrap it up here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of the New York Giants 2024 offseason. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently than that? We'll see you guys next time.